Welcome to Geo Capitalist, where we decode global wealth, one power shift at a time. Something quiet but historic just happened on Canada's Pacific coast. No grand announcement, no flashy summit, just one ship carrying liquefied natural gas not to the United States, but straight across the Pacific to South Korea. It marked the beginning of a new route, a new era, and for some, a quiet betrayal. Because for decades, Canada's energy exports relied heavily on U.S. pipelines and Gulf Coast terminals. But on July 2025, that dynamic changed. Canada launched its first large-scale LNG shipment from the Kitimat terminal in British Columbia, bypassing American infrastructure entirely. This wasn't just a trade decision, it was a realignment of energy strategy. While the U.S. paused its LNG growth under regulatory review, Canada accelerated. And now the consequences are showing up, not in headlines, but in contracts, cargo routes, and long-term supply deals. So today we're breaking it down. Why Canada ditches U.S. gas for Asia? Yep, Canada cut off U.S. gas pipelines, and now Asia's first in line. What happened behind the scenes? What comes next? And most importantly, why isn't anyone in Washington talking about it? So, subscribe to the channel, and let's get into it. It didn't happen with fireworks. It happened with a quiet departure from the port of Kitimat. On July 1st, 2025, Canada shipped its first ever large-scale cargo of liquefied natural gas straight to Asia. The buyer? South Korea. The route? Across the Pacific, with no stopover in Texas, Louisiana, or any U.S. Gulf terminal. And the message? Canada no longer needs the United States to deliver its gas to the global market. This was the long-awaited launch of the $40 billion LNG Canada project backed by Shell, Petronas, PetroChina, Mitsubishi, and Korea Gas. The facility is designed to process 14 million tons of LNG annually in its first phase, with room to double that capacity in Phase 2. But the numbers, impressive as they are, only tell part of the story. What matters more is what this terminal represents. For the first time, Canadian natural gas can leave the continent without passing through a U.S. pipeline or being stored at an American export hub. It gives Canada sovereignty over its outbound energy flows, and for countries like China, Japan, and South Korea, that makes a difference. It means shorter delivery routes, lower carbon intensity, and zero entanglement with Washington's policy swings. It also gives Canada the power to negotiate directly, not through a middleman. This wasn't just a shipment, it was a statement. The U.S. may still dominate LNG volumes, but the map is shifting and Canada just redrew part of it. So, what exactly is LNG, and why does it matter so much? Liquefied natural gas, LNG, is more than a fuel. It's a geopolitical tool. It starts as methane, extracted from underground gas fields. Then it's cooled to 162 degrees Celsius, turning it into a liquid that takes up 1/600th of its original volume. That makes it possible to ship it across oceans to power factories, cities, and entire nations. For decades, LNG has been dominated by a few key players: the US, Qatar, and Australia. But now Canada is entering the game not just as a seller, but as a strategic alternative. And here's why it matters. Natural gas is seen as a transitional fuel, cleaner than coal or oil, but still powerful enough to run major economies. As Asia's demand rises and renewables struggle to scale fast enough, LNG offers a bridge: affordable, scalable, relatively clean. Japan alone could need 70 million tons per year by 2040 if solar and wind don't keep pace. China, South Korea, and India are close behind. And unlike oil, LNG isn't traded on a single global benchmark. It's built on contracts, relationships, and access. That's where Canada's new position matters. It offers lower methane emissions, hydro-powered facilities, and, most importantly, stable governance. No sanctions, no naval choke points, no political overtones. It's LNG without strings attached. In an era of polarized energy, politics, Canada's gas looks boring. And that's exactly the appeal. Because when governments plan 10, 20 years ahead, the priority isn't headlines, it's reliability. And now, for the first time, Canada is offering exactly that, at scale. Is this the end of U.S. pipeline dependence? Let's take a closer look. For decades, Canada's natural gas flowed south, not east. It crossed provincial borders into U.S. pipelines, was processed in Gulf Coast terminals, and then shipped overseas under American labels. It was convenient, familiar, and, for a time, profitable. But it was never sovereign. Canada's role in global energy was that of a supplier, not a player. It provided the gas. The U.S. handled the rest. That model worked, until it didn't. Because as geopolitical tensions rose and U.S. energy policy became more unpredictable, Canada faced a choice: stay dependent on American infrastructure or build its own. That's exactly what it did. The LNG Canada terminal at Kitimat isn't just a facility, it's a release valve. It frees Canadian gas from the long, costly, politically entangled journey through U.S. pipelines and Gulf ports. The shipping route alone is transformative. From Kitimat, a cargo ship can reach Asia in less than 11 days. From the Gulf Coast, it can take 20, assuming the Panama Canal isn't congested. That time difference translates into lower costs, faster turnaround, and more favorable contracts. But more importantly, it offers something the U.S. can't: neutrality. Buyers in Asia want gas, not politics. They want predictable supply chains, not congressional delays or executive orders. Kitimat offers a direct line, backed by hydroelectric power, remote from conflict zones, and independent of U.S. regulatory cycles. And as the first ship left the dock this summer, it symbolized more than efficiency. It marked the end of Canadian pipeline dependency, a quiet shift in the power map, one that Washington didn't authorize and can't easily reverse. And you might be wondering, what's really behind the U.S. LNG freeze? Are tariffs and trade tensions the driving force? Energy alliances don't collapse overnight. They erode, one policy at a time. In early 2025, the U.S. administration announced a sweeping pause on all new LNG export permits to non-FTA countries. Officially, it was framed as an environmental review. Unofficially, it sent a signal. Washington was tightening control over its energy levers. That pause created uncertainty across global markets. Investors stalled projects. Buyers grew cautious. And in Ottawa, it triggered something else entirely: momentum. Canada had long lived in the shadow of its southern neighbor. The infrastructure was built around American access points. The pricing followed Henry Hub benchmarks. But as U.S. politics hardened, and as Canadian gas found itself caught in tariff disputes and soft embargoes, policymakers began shifting course. Aluminum tariffs had already tested the trade relationship. Now LNG was next. Canada wasn't sanctioned, it was simply deprioritized. And in global energy, that's all it takes. So when the U.S. froze new LNG approvals, Canada accelerated its Pacific project timelines. Quietly, confidently, and without asking permission. By July, the message was clear. Canada wasn't waiting for Washington. It was bypassing it. And for Asian buyers, wary of America's growing politicization of energy exports, that mattered. This wasn't retaliation, it was realignment, a recognition that energy in the 2020s is about more than supply, it's about who controls the tap. And with Kitimat now online, Canada didn't just open a new LNG terminal, it opened a new route to influence, powered not by tariffs, but by timing. Let's shift our focus to Canada's development of the LNG Canada project and the complex cost of maintaining control. If you only look at the final launch, the LNG Canada project seems like a clean, strategic win. But behind that quiet July departure from Kitimat is a decade-long saga of resistance, delays, and billion-dollar bets. The infrastructure itself is extraordinary. A liquefaction terminal carved into remote British Columbia coastline, fed by the $14.5 billion Coastal GasLink pipeline stretching over 670 kilometers from the Montney gas fields. But what makes this project historic isn't its engineering. It's what it overcame, and what it now allows. From the very beginning, LNG Canada wasn't just a construction challenge. It was a political minefield. Environmental activists opposed it. First Nations groups demanded sovereignty and consultation. Provincial regulations stacked layer upon layer of compliance. Legal battles dragged into the courts. At one point, critics predicted it would never be built. But it was. Not because Canada is easy to build in, but because energy sovereignty isn't optional anymore. The result is more than a terminal. It's a geopolitical tool. Kitimat gives Canada direct access to Asia, without relying on American permits, Gulf port bottlenecks, or fluctuating foreign policy. That access didn't come cheap. The delays cost billions. The legal process tested every stakeholder. But the outcome was control. Canada now controls the full supply chain from wellhead to ocean. It's not just exporting gas, it's exporting autonomy. And in a world where pipelines and alliances are increasingly politicized, that kind of autonomy is currency. This wasn't just LNG. This was a national energy reset, built brick by brick, lawsuit by lawsuit over 10 long years. Let's pivot to Canada's strategic plans for expanding its LNG sector. Kitimat was never meant to be the finish line. It's just the beginning. As the first shipments depart for Asia, Canada is already planning the next phase. And this time, the scale is bigger, faster, and even more deliberate. LNG Canada's Phase 2 is already in development, designed to double its export capacity to 28 million tons per year. That would put it in direct competition with major Gulf Coast facilities, but with a fraction of the geopolitical friction, and it's not alone. Other terminals in British Columbia are quietly lining up behind it. Mexico, too, is accelerating its Pacific LNG ambitions. What's happening isn't isolated, it's coordinated. Why now? Because the global window is open. Asia's LNG demand is projected to surge by 70% by 2040. Japan, South Korea, India, and China are all looking for long-term contracts, not just spot purchases. But they want more than volume. They want trust. And Canada, with its clean energy branding, stable governance, and non-military footprint, is positioning itself as the non-political energy partner the 21st century requires. It's a quiet kind of power. No superpower status, no naval fleets, just contracts, credibility, and control over the most stable supply corridor in the Western Hemisphere. Canadian energy executives now speak in new terms of sovereignty, resilience, multipolar demand. One industry insider said it bluntly: this isn't just expansion, it's insulation from volatility, from tariffs, from geopolitical leverage. The U.S. may still dominate LNG headlines, but Canada's strategy is built for longevity. And with every new terminal that comes online, the message gets louder. The future of energy might not run through Washington at all. Canada's LNG ambitions may be gaining momentum, but they're not without friction. Behind every shipment lies a balancing act between opportunity and restraint. On one side, the math is clear. Global LNG demand is rising fast, particularly in Asia, where decarbonization is outpacing infrastructure. Countries like Japan and India are seeking long-term contracts with predictable, low-emission suppliers. And now, for the first time, Canada can answer that call. With hydro-powered terminals, access to one of the cleanest gas basins in North America, and a direct Pacific route, it checks all the boxes for modern energy buyers. On the surface, the opportunity looks unstoppable, but look deeper, and the picture gets more complicated. LNG Canada is one of the most expensive energy builds in the Western Hemisphere. Environmental groups are already mobilizing around future expansions. Some indigenous leaders continue to oppose pipeline routes that cross ancestral land. And inside Ottawa, growing climate pressure threatens to tighten emissions caps that could slow production growth just as demand peaks abroad. Even market pricing is a risk. Canadian gas trades far below global benchmarks. Good for buyers, but tough for margins if volatility returns. Still, the underlying logic holds. Kitimat exists. The route is real. The ships are moving. And while obstacles remain, so does the advantage of being early. In this space, timing is leverage. Canada is no longer trailing behind the US, it's building its own lane, on its own terms. And in a world where energy security is no longer guaranteed, that kind of forward positioning could prove more valuable than any pipeline or port. Is Canadian energy on the brink of a transformational new chapter? Let's dive in. Energy narratives often unfold in the shadows of larger economies. Canada, for decades, was seen as the junior partner, a reliable supplier of raw materials routed through American infrastructure and priced on American terms. But with the launch of LNG Canada, that chapter has closed. The country is no longer just exporting gas, it's exporting strategy. And that shift has implications far beyond British Columbia. The ability to bypass U.S. pipelines isn't just logistical, it's psychological. It signals to buyers, especially in Asia, that Canada can act independently, negotiate directly, and deliver reliably without entanglement in U.S. foreign policy. That kind of neutrality has become a rare commodity. Japan and South Korea, both highly dependent on LNG, now see Canada as a hedge against Gulf Coast congestion and Middle East instability. For China and India, it's a way to secure cleaner fuel without the optics of dependency on the U.S. And for Canada itself, it's a long-awaited seat at the table. With Kitimat live and Phase 2 already in motion, the country now has leverage it never held before. It can shape terms, not just meet them. It can engage in energy diplomacy as a builder, not just a borrower. The world is entering a new phase of multipolar energy, and Canada, quietly and methodically, is writing itself into the script. Not through declarations, not through dominance, but through infrastructure, route control, and credibility. In the 21st century, power isn't just about barrels or BTUs. It's about access, speed, and trust. And Canada, finally, has all three. What happened in Kitimat wasn't loud. It wasn't political, but it was powerful. A single LNG shipment quietly left Canada's Pacific coast and rewrote part of the global energy map. No longer tethered to U.S. pipelines. No longer waiting on Washington's approvals. Just a new route, built from scratch, leading straight to Asia. For the first time, Canada holds the pen in its own energy story. Not as a junior partner, not as a commodity footnote, but as a builder of infrastructure, a supplier of trust, and a player in the multipolar world that's now taking shape. It didn't need a headline to make that shift. It just needed timing, credibility, and the will to finish what it started. And if you've been watching Geo Capitalist for a while, you know what comes next. This isn't just about gas, it's about leverage, about which nations will shape the trade corridors, energy alliances, and infrastructure of the next 20 years. The US may still hold volume, but Canada just claims something harder to replicate, a new kind of independence. If you found this breakdown insightful, watch our next video. It connects directly to what's unfolding. And don't forget to subscribe. Your support helps us track these quiet shifts in power before they show up in the headlines. Let us know in the comments. Is Canada building the future, or simply escaping the past. Either way, the map is changing, and we'll be here, one power shift at a time. This was why Canada just cut off U.S. gas and sent it straight to Asia instead. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.